Ladies, let me take you straight into the heart of something I've felt, something that's burned in my chest so fiercely it's shaped everything I've ever built. Picture this. You're standing at a crossroads, the air heavy with possibility, your pulse racing because, deep down in that raw, unshakable part of you, that this moment could define everything. It's not about a dress, a glance, or a fleeting compliment. It's about the fire inside you, the spark that makes you not just beautiful, but unforgettable. That's the kind of woman who stops the world in its tracks. That's the kind of woman I've always been drawn to, not because of how she looks, but because of how she burns. And I'm here to tell you, you have that fire, every single one of you. The question is, are you ready to let it blaze? I grew up in Pretoria, South Africa, a kid with dreams bigger than the dusty streets I walked. Back then, I wasn't thinking about love or beauty in the way most people do. I was staring at the stars, obsessed with galaxies, rockets, and the idea that humanity could break free from this fragile little planet. But even in those days, there was someone, a girl who changed how I saw the world. She wasn't just pretty, she was electric. Her eyes didn't just sparkle, they burned with ideas, with questions, with a hunger for something bigger than the world around her. When she spoke, it wasn't small talk, it was about dreams, about possibilities, about things that made the universe feel alive. And let me tell you, that kind of fire, it's rare, it's magnetic, it's the kind of beauty that doesn't fade with time, because it's not skin deep, it's soul deep. Here's the truth I've learned, and I want every woman in this room to hear it. Beauty isn't about fitting into someone else's mold. It's not about chasing approval or dimming your light to make others comfortable. The most beautiful women I've ever known, whether it was that girl in Pretoria or the brilliant minds I've worked with at SpaceX and Tesla, weren't beautiful because they tried to be. They were beautiful because they were alive. They had a fire inside them, a purpose that made them leap out of bed in the morning, a mission that kept them awake at night. And when you live like that, when you let that fire burn, you don't just become beautiful, you become indispensable. You become the kind of woman people can't imagine losing, not because you beg them to stay, but because your existence shakes the ground they stand on. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're in a room full of people, all of them clamoring for attention, all of them trying to prove they're enough. Now imagine one woman who doesn't need to prove anything. She's not loud or flashy, but there's something about her. She's building something, a career, a family, a vision, a piece of art that consumes her in the best way. When she walks away, the room feels emptier, not because she demanded attention, but because her presence carried weight. That's the kind of beauty I'm talking about. It's not about a perfect face or a perfect figure. It's about a life so vibrant, so full of purpose, that the thought of you not being there feels like a void too deep to fill. I remember nights in Pretoria, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, not thinking about school or what people thought of me, but about the stars. They weren't just lights in the sky, they were a challenge. They whispered, how far can you go? What can you build if you refuse to accept the limits handed to you? That question lit a fire in me, and it's the same fire I see in the women who've left a mark on me. They weren't chasing love or validation, they were chasing something bigger, something that made the universe take notice. And when you chase something like that, when you pour your heart into a mission that sets your soul on fire, you create a kind of gravity. People don't just want to be near you, they need to be near you because your energy, your drive, your purpose is something they can't replicate. Here's the thing. You don't need to be building rockets or electric cars to have that kind of impact. Your mission doesn't have to be cosmic in scale, it just has to be real. Maybe it's raising a family with love and intention. Maybe it's writing stories that change hearts. Maybe it's coding an app that solves a problem no one else saw. The size of the dream doesn't matter, the fire does. Every single day, you have to ask yourself, am I living a life that makes me indispensable? Am I building something, whether it's a career, a passion, a way of being, that makes the thought of me walking away impossible to ignore? The answer can't come from anyone else. It has to come from you. I've been in rooms with the brightest minds, engineers, scientists, visionaries, and I've seen what happens when someone lives with that kind of fire. They don't need to demand attention, it follows them. I've seen it in the women who've worked beside me who didn't shrink themselves to fit into someone else's idea of what they should be. They showed up with ideas, with grit, with a refusal to settle for anything less than extraordinary. And let me tell you, that's when people lean in. That's when they feel that electric pang in their chest, that fear that if they don't hold on, they might lose something irreplaceable. Not because those women were playing games, but because they were living in a way that made their presence feel like a gift. Let's talk about you for a second. Every woman in this room has felt that pressure, the pressure to be perfect, to be available, to be everything to everyone. You've been told that beauty is about how you look, how you dress, how you make others feel. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Beauty isn't about pleasing others. It's about pleasing yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a way that honors the fire inside you. It's about waking up every morning and asking, what am I building today? What am I chasing that makes my heart race? Because when you live like that, when you stop apologizing for your intensity, your ambition, your dreams, you don't just become beautiful, you become a force that people can't help but notice, can't help but respect, can't help but fear losing. Think about water for a moment. If you've got a gallon of it in your fridge, you don't think twice about it. It's just there. But if you're stranded in the desert, lips cracked, sun blazing down, that same water becomes more valuable than gold. You guard it, you cherish it, you'd fight for it. That's what your presence should feel like, not because you're playing hard to get, not because you're manipulating anyone, but because you're pouring yourself into something so extraordinary that your time, your energy, your light becomes rare. That's the kind of beauty that doesn't fade. That's the kind of beauty that makes people lean in, not out of desperation, but out of awe. I've made every mistake in this area. I've tried to be what people wanted too available, too eager to prove I cared. I thought that's what would make people stay. It didn't. What worked was when I stopped asking for permission to be extraordinary. When I decided that my dreams, whether it was building a rocket or redefining transportation, were worth more than anyone's approval, that's when the world shifted. That's when the people who mattered started to see me differently. They didn't just want my time, they valued it. They didn't just want my presence, they cherished it. And it wasn't because I was playing games, it was because I was living in a way that made my existence feel like a once in a lifetime comet streaking across the sky. So, ladies, let me ask you this. What's the fire inside you? What's the thing that keeps you up at night that makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning? Maybe it's a dream you've buried because someone told you it was too big, too impractical, too out there. Maybe it's a passion you've dimmed because you're afraid of being too much. I'm here to tell you, be too much, be intense, be obsessed. Because the women who change the world, the women who make people fear losing them, aren't the ones who play small. They're the ones who burn so brightly that their light reshapes the universe around them. When I was a kid, I read books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and played games like Civilization. They weren't just stories or entertainment, they were blueprints for what's possible. They taught me that imagination isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. And I saw that same spark in the women who've inspired me most. They didn't wait for permission to dream big. They didn't shrink themselves to fit into someone else's box. They built their own worlds, brick by brick, idea by idea, and in doing so, they became magnetic. They became the kind of women you can't look away from, not because of how they looked, but because of how they lived. Here's the challenge I'm laying down for you. Stop asking what you need to do to be loved. Stop asking what you need to change to be enough. Start asking what kind of life you need to build to love yourself so fiercely that the world can't help but take notice. Because when you live like that, when you let your fire burn without apology, you don't just become beautiful, you become a star that lights up the sky, that pulls people into your orbit, that makes them realize that losing you would be like losing a piece of the universe itself. This isn't about being perfect. It's not about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It's about showing up every day and choosing to live in a way that honors the fire inside you. It's about saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm building. And if you want to be part of it, you better bring your own fire because I'm not slowing down. That's the kind of woman who doesn't just turn heads, she changes lives. That's the kind of woman who makes people fear losing her, not because she's unattainable, but because she's unforgettable. So go find your fire. Go chase the thing that makes your heart race, that makes your soul sing, that makes you feel alive. Don't wait for someone to hand you a match. You already have the spark. All you need to do is fan it into a flame. And when you do, when you let that fire burn brighter than you ever thought possible, you'll see the truth. The world doesn't just want you, it needs you. And that, ladies, is the kind of beauty that never fades. Ladies, let's dive into something that flips everything you've been taught about being wanted, about being valued, about being a woman who commands attention without saying a word. You've been told to be everywhere, to be everything, to answer every call, to show up for every demand, to pour yourself out until there's nothing left. But here's the raw, unfiltered truth I've learned. The most powerful women aren't the ones who are always available. They're the ones who are rare. Not because they're playing games, not because they're hiding, but because they're so consumed by their mission, their passion, their fire, that their presence becomes a treasure, like a single bottle of water in the middle of a desert. That's the kind of woman who makes the world lean in. That's the kind of woman people fear losing. And I'm here to tell you how to become her. Let me take you back to the early days of SpaceX. We were burning through cash faster than a rocket burns fuel. I was sleeping on the factory floor, surrounded by engineers, prototypes, and the constant threat of bankruptcy. Every second of my life was poured into one thing: making humanity multiplanetary. I didn't have time for endless phone calls or casual dinners. My energy was finite, and I had to guard it like it was the last resource on Earth. And you know what happened? The people who mattered, the ones who believed in the mission, the ones who saw the fire in me, they didn't walk away. They leaned in closer. They fought to be part of it, not because I was always there, but because I wasn't. My time, my focus, my presence, it was scarce, and scarcity creates value. This isn't about manipulating anyone. It's not about ghosting people or pretending you're too busy to care. It's about living a life so full, so driven by purpose, that your availability naturally shrinks. When you're chasing something that sets your soul on fire, whether it's building a company, raising a family, or creating art that changes hearts, your time becomes precious. You stop saying yes to every request. You stop bending over backward to please everyone. And in that moment, something shifts. The people around you start to see you differently. They don't just want your time, they crave it. They don't just value your presence, they treasure it because they know it's not guaranteed. They know it's earned. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at a market and there's a stall with 100 apples. You grab one, toss it in your basket, and move on. You don't think twice about it. Now imagine a single perfect apple, rare, vibrant, one of a kind. You don't just grab it, you stop, you admire it, you're careful with it because you know there's nothing else like it. That's what your presence should be. Not one of 100, but one in a million. Not because you're trying to be exclusive, but because you're pouring yourself into something so extraordinary that your time becomes a limited edition masterpiece. I've seen this play out in my own life, time and time again. When I was grinding through the chaos of Tesla's early days, we were fighting to survive. Production lines were breaking down, suppliers were bailing, and the world was betting against us. I was working 80, sometimes 100 hours a week. My phone was buzzing constantly, friends, family, colleagues, all wanting a piece of me, but I couldn't give it. Every ounce of my energy was going into keeping the company alive, into proving that electric cars could change the world. And here's what I noticed: the people who didn't understand the mission faded away. They got frustrated, complained, walked off. But the ones who mattered, they stayed. They respected that my time wasn't cheap anymore. They saw that an hour with me wasn't just an hour, it was a choice, a moment carved out of a life consumed by something bigger. That's the power of scarcity. It's not about being cold or distant. It's about being so immersed in your purpose that your presence becomes a gift, not a given. And when you live like that, something incredible happens. The people who stay, the ones who lean in, they start to feel that electric pang in their chest, the fear that if they don't hold on, they might lose you. Not because you're threatening to leave, but because you're already moving toward a horizon they want to be part of. Let me make this personal for you. How many times have you stretched yourself thin, saying yes to things that drain you, to people who don't see your worth? How many hours have you given away to obligations that didn't light you up, that didn't move you closer to the woman you want to be? I get it. Society tells women to be nurturing, to be available, to put everyone else first. But here's the hard truth: when you give yourself away too freely, you send a message. You're saying your time isn't valuable. You're saying your dreams can wait, and the world hears that message loud and clear. But when you start guarding your time, when you start saying no to what doesn't serve your fire, everything changes. Your yeses gain weight, your presence becomes rare, and suddenly people don't just notice you, they need you. Um, I remember a moment during the Tesla grind when I had to make a choice. A close friend wanted me to fly across the country for a weekend just to hang out. It sounded nice, normal even, but I was in the middle of production hell, sleeping in the factory, trying to figure out how to build thousands of cars when we could barely build hundreds. I said no. It wasn't easy. It felt like I was letting someone down. But I knew that if I said yes to that weekend, I was saying no to the mission that was keeping me alive. And you know what? That friend didn't just understand, they respected me more for it. They saw that my time wasn't just time, it was a piece of something bigger. And when I did finally carve out an hour to call them, that hour meant more than a whole weekend ever could, because it was intentional, it was chosen. That's what I want for you. I want you to live in a way that makes your time feel like gold. Not because you're withholding it to play games, but because you're investing it in something that matters: a project, a passion, a purpose that lights you up from the inside. Maybe it's starting a business that solves a problem you've always cared about. Maybe it's raising kids who grow up knowing they can change the world. Maybe it's painting, writing, coding, teaching, whatever it is, make it yours. Make it so consuming, so vibrant that when you give someone your time, they feel like they've been handed a treasure. Here's the science of it, because I'm a guy who likes to break things down. Human psychology is wired to value what's scarce. It's why we chase diamonds, why we obsess over rare art, why we'll spend billions to explore the stars. When something feels endless, we take it for granted. But when it's rare, when it's hard to come by, we guard it like it's sacred. Your time, your energy, your presence, it's no different. If you're always available, always saying yes, always rearranging your life for others, you're like that gallon of water in the fridge. Nobody thinks twice about it. But when you're focused, when you're driven, when your life is so full that you can't say yes to everything, you become that bottle of water in the desert. People don't just want you, they fight to keep you. I've seen this in the women who've inspired me most. They weren't the ones who were always there, always answering, always bending to fit someone else's schedule. They were the ones who had their own orbit. They were building something, a career, a vision, a life that demanded their focus. And when they gave you a moment, it wasn't just a moment, it was a window into their world, a glimpse of something extraordinary. That's what made them unforgettable. That's what made me fear losing them, not because they were distant, but because they were present in a way that felt rare, intentional, alive. So, ladies, let's talk about how you do this. Start by asking yourself, what's my mission? What's the thing that makes me feel alive, that makes me want to jump out of bed and take on the world? It doesn't have to be huge, it just has to be yours. Maybe it's starting a nonprofit that changes lives. Maybe it's mastering a skill that sets your soul on fire. Maybe it's creating a home where love and strength are the foundation. Whatever it is, make it your North Star. Let it guide every decision, every yes, every no. Then start saying no. I know that sounds hard. Women are taught to say yes, to be agreeable, to keep the peace. But every time you say yes to something that doesn't light you up, you're saying no to the thing that does. And that's a cost you can't afford. Say no to the meeting that doesn't move you forward. Say no to the obligation that drains your energy. Say no to the people who don't see your worth. Because every no you give makes space for a yes that matters, a yes to your dreams, your passions, your fire. When you start living like this, something magical happens. Your time becomes scarce, not because you're hiding, but because you're building. And in that scarcity, your presence becomes powerful. People don't just see you, they feel you. They don't just want to be around you, they want to be part of what you're creating. And when they realize that your time is a gift, that your attention is a choice, they start to fear losing you. Not because you're manipulating them, but because you've become someone they can't imagine their world without. I'll leave you with this. The most beautiful women I've ever known weren't beautiful because they were always there. They were beautiful because they were times, some system, somewhere. They were beautiful because they were chasing something bigger, something that made their presence electric, something that made the thought of losing them feel like losing a piece of the universe. And that's what I want for you. Don't be the woman who's always available, always bending, always waiting. Be the woman who's so consumed by her fire that her presence is a treasure, a rarity, a force that pulls the world into her orbit. Because when you live like that, when you make your time scarce by pouring it into something extraordinary, you don't just become beautiful, you become unforgettable. And that's the kind of woman who changes everything. Ladies, let's get raw for a moment. You're standing in the wreckage of a dream that didn't work out, a project that crashed, a relationship that crumbled, a goal you poured your heart into only to watch it slip through your fingers. Your chest feels tight, your confidence is bruised, and the world is whispering that maybe you're not enough. I've been there. I've stood in the ashes of failure so many times it's practically my second home. But here's the truth I've learned, and I want you to carve it into your soul. Failure isn't the end, it's fuel. It's the rocket propellant that launches you toward the woman you're meant to become. And when you learn to burn that fuel, you don't just rise, you soar. You become the kind of woman people can't look away from, not because you're flawless, but because you're unstoppable. Let me take you to one of the darkest moments of my life. SpaceX, my dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species, was on the edge of collapse. Three rockets in a row had exploded, three millions of dollars, years of work, the trust of my team, all gone in fire and smoke. I can still feel the weight of those days, the way the air seemed to press down on me, the way every news outlet was ready to write our obituary. After that third failure, the math was brutal. We had enough money for one more shot. One. If that rocket didn't fly, SpaceX was done, my credibility was done. Everything I'd poured myself into would be reduced to a footnote in someone else's story. But in that moment, when the stakes were that high, I learned something that changed me forever. Failure doesn't define you, it refines you. Here's what I want you to understand. Failure isn't a verdict. It's a teacher. It's a crucible that burns away the fluff and forces you to face who you really are. When those rockets blew up, I could have walked away. I could have said, this is too hard, this is too much, but I didn't. I looked at the wreckage and saw data, raw, unfiltered data about what went wrong, what we could fix, what we could do better. Every explosion was a lesson, every setback a map to the next step. And that's what made the Falcon 9 possible. That's what got us to orbit. That's what proved the doubters wrong. Failure wasn't the end, it was the ignition system for everything that came next. Now, let's make this about you. Every woman in this room has faced failure. Maybe it was a business that didn't take off, a dream you put on hold, a relationship that broke your heart, or a moment when you felt like you let yourself down. I see you. I know that sting. But I'm here to tell you that those moments aren't your defeat, they're your superpower. Because when you walk through failure and keep going, when you pick up the pieces and build something new, you show the world what you're made of, you show yourself what you're made of, and that, ladies, is the kind of beauty that stops people in their tracks. Think about the women you admire most, not the ones on magazine covers, but the ones who've left a mark on your life. Are they perfect? Have they never failed? Of course not. The women who inspire us are the ones who've fallen, bled, cried, and still got up with their eyes fixed on the horizon. They're the ones who took their pain and turned it into power, their mistakes into momentum. That's what makes them unforgettable. That's what makes people fear losing them, not because they never stumble, but because they always rise. I remember a woman who worked with me at Tesla in the early days. She was an engineer, brilliant, but the pressure was crushing. We were behind schedule, the factory was chaos, and she was leading a team that kept hitting dead ends. One day, a critical system she'd designed failed spectacularly during testing. The whole room went quiet. You could feel the weight of it, her reputation, her confidence, everything on the line. But she didn't crumble. She didn't make excuses. She went straight to the data, tore it apart, and came back with a solution that not only fixed the problem, but made the system better than it had ever been. That moment didn't just save the project, it defined her. People didn't just respect her for her brilliance, they respected her for her grit. They leaned in, not because she was perfect, but because she was relentless. That's what failure does when you embrace it. It strips away the noise and shows you who you are. It shows the people around you who you are. And when they see you rise from the ashes, when they see you take a hit and keep building, they don't just admire you, they fear losing you because they know you're not someone who breaks. You're someone who rebuilds. And that kind of strength, that kind of fire is rarer than any diamond. Here's how you do it. The next time you fail, and trust me, you will, because failure is part of being human. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Stand in the middle of it and ask, what is this teaching me? Maybe you launched a project and it flopped. Dig into why. Was it the strategy, the execution, the timing? Every failure is a data set, and every data set is a map to something better. Maybe you poured your heart into a relationship and it didn't work out. Don't let it make you smaller. Ask what it taught you about yourself, about what you need, about what you won't settle for next time. Failure isn't a stop sign, it's a detour to a better road. And don't just stop at learning. Use it. Take that pain, that frustration, that moment when you felt like giving up, and turn it into fuel. When I was staring down the barrel of that fourth rocket launch, I didn't let fear paralyze me. I let it drive me. I worked harder, questioned everything, pushed my team to think beyond what we'd done before. And when that rocket finally launched, when it broke through the atmosphere and reached orbit, it wasn't just a win for SpaceX, it was a win for every failure that came before it. Those explosions, those setbacks, they weren't losses. They were the fuel that got us to the stars. Ladies, you have that same fuel inside you. Every time you've fallen, every time you've been knocked down, you've been given a gift. Not the kind wrapped in a bow, but the kind that burns in your chest and pushes you forward. Use it. Let it propel you toward the woman you're becoming. Because when you do, you don't just change your own life, you change the way people see you. They stop seeing you as someone who might break. They start seeing you as someone who builds no matter what. And that's when they start to fear losing you, not because you're perfect, but because you're indestructible. Let me tell you about another moment that stuck with me. There was a woman I knew, not in a romantic way, but someone whose fire left a mark. She was an artist, struggling to get her work noticed. She'd poured years into her craft, but galleries kept rejecting her. Critics tore her apart. She could have quit. Most people would have, but she didn't. She took every rejection every harsh word, and used it to sharpen her vision. She experimented, she innovated, she pushed boundaries no one else dared to touch. And when her work finally broke through, when people started lining up to see it, it wasn't just because of her talent. It was because of her refusal to let failure define her. That's what made her magnetic. That's what made people want to be near her, to be part of her world. They didn't just see her art, they saw her fight. That's the kind of woman I want you to be. The kind who doesn't let failure dim her light, but uses it to burn brighter. The kind who doesn't apologize for her scars, but wears them like badges of honor. Because those scars, they're proof you fought. They're proof you've survived. And when people see that, when they see the fire in you that refuses to go out, they don't just respect you, they need you. They need your strength, your resilience, your ability to turn pain into power. And they'll fear losing you, not because you never fail, but because you've shown them what it looks like to rise every single time. So here's the challenge. The next time you fail, don't hide, don't shrink. Stand tall in the wreckage and say, "This is my fuel." Take the lessons, take the pain, and use them to build something extraordinary. Maybe it's a new project, a new dream, a new version of you. Whatever it is, let it be bold, let it be fearless. Because when you live like that, when you turn failure into forward motion, you become a force. You become the kind of woman who doesn't just survive, she thrives. And the world, it doesn't just notice you, it fears the day you might walk away because there's no one else who can burn like you do. Ladies, let's talk about something that separates the dreamers from the doers, the women who wish from the women who make the world shift. It's not enough to have a fire inside you, a spark that burns for something bigger. Fire without structure is just a flash bright for a moment, then gone. To become the kind of woman who doesn't just inspire but commands respect, who makes people fear losing her not out of desperation but out of awe, you need to build your life like a rocket. You need architecture, a system, a design, a blueprint that channels your passion into momentum, into impact, into a legacy that outlasts you. That's what I've learned from building companies, from pushing humanity toward the stars, and from watching the women who've left me in awe. And that's what I'm going to share with you now. How to design a life so deliberate, so unapologetically yours, that it becomes a force no one can ignore. When I started SpaceX, the goal wasn't just to launch a rocket, it was to make humanity multiplanetary, to give us a shot at surviving beyond this fragile blue dot. That was the vision, the North Star. But a vision alone doesn't get you to orbit. A rocket doesn't fly because of one brilliant part. It flies because thousands of parts work in harmony, each one designed with precision, each one serving the mission. That's what I mean by architecture. It's not just dreaming big, it's building a system that turns your dream into reality. And for you ladies, that system is your life. Every choice, every habit, every boundary you set, it's all part of the design that makes you not just beautiful, but indispensable. Let's break this down. The first layer of your life's architecture is your vision. What's the one thing that keeps you up at night, that makes your heart race, that feels bigger than you? For me, it was the stars, always the stars. As a kid in Pretoria, I'd lie awake, not thinking about the next day's classes or what people thought of me, but about what it would take to get humanity to Mars. That vision wasn't negotiable. It was my compass, the thing that guided every decision I made. For you, it might be different. Maybe it's creating a business that changes lives. Maybe it's raising kids who grow up to challenge the status quo. Maybe it's writing a book that shifts how people see the world. Whatever it is, it has to be yours, clear, unshakable, and so real it feels like it's pulling you forward. Because without a vision, you're just drifting. And drifting women don't make people fear losing them, they make people forget them. Once you have that vision, the next layer is goals. Not vague wishes, not someday dreams, but specific, measurable, sometimes brutal goals. At Tesla, we didn't just want to build electric cars. We set a goal to ramp up production from 500 cars a week to 5,000. It was a number that kept us awake, that pushed us to the edge, but it was also the bridge between vision and reality. For you, your goals might look different. Maybe it's saving $10,000 to start your own business. Maybe it's running a half marathon in under 2 hours. Maybe it's getting your art into a gallery or your kids into a school that sets them up for greatness. Goals are the concrete steps that turn your vision into something you can touch. They're the milestones that say, I'm not just dreaming, I'm building. And when people see you hitting those milestones, they don't just see a woman with dreams, they see a woman with a plan. The third layer is habits. This is where the rubber meets the road. Habits are the small, unglamorous choices that add up to destiny. For me, it was staying up late, reading physics, textbooks, sketching rocket designs, asking questions that made people uncomfortable. It wasn't sexy, it was obsessive. But those habits built the foundation for everything I've done. For you, habits might mean waking up an hour early to work on your business plan. It might mean saying no to distractions so you can focus on your craft. It might mean carving out 30 minutes a day to read, to learn, to grow. Habits are the bricks of your architecture. They're not exciting on their own, but stack them up day after day, and they become a fortress, a life that stands strong against the chaos of the world. Then come boundaries, the fourth layer. This is where most people, especially women, get tripped up. You're taught to be open, to be available, to say yes to everyone and everything. But let me tell you something, a rocket doesn't fly if you let anyone mess with its design. At SpaceX, I had to guard our mission like it was sacred. Investors wanted changes, critics wanted compromises, even friends wanted time I didn't have. I learned to say no, not because I wanted to push people away, but because I had to protect the mission. For you, boundaries are just as critical. They're the walls that keep your vision safe. Say no to the colleague who wants you to take on their work. Say no to the friend who drains your energy with endless drama. Say no to the expectations that tell you to shrink, to be less, to be anything other than the woman you're becoming. Because every no you say is a yes to your mission, to your fire, to the life you're building. Finally, there's measurement. You can't improve what you don't measure. At SpaceX, we lived by telemetry data that told us what worked, what failed, what needed to change. Every launch, every explosion, every success was a chance to learn. In your life, measurement means taking a hard look at yourself. Are your habits moving you closer to your goals? Are your boundaries holding strong? Are you living in alignment with your vision? This isn't about beating yourself up, it's about being honest. If you're not where you want to be, figure out why. If you're making progress, double down on what's working. Measurement is the feedback loop that keeps your architecture solid. Without it, you're just guessing. Let me tell you about a woman who embodied this. She was a designer at Tesla, tasked with creating something the world had never seen, an electric car that didn't just function but felt like the future. The pressure was insane. Deadlines were tight, budgets were tighter, and the world was watching, ready to pounce on any mistake. But she didn't just show up with talent. She showed up with a system. Her vision was clear: to design something that would make people rethink what a car could be. Her goals were specific: sketches by this date, prototypes by that one. Her habits were relentless: late nights, endless iterations, constant learning. She set boundaries, saying no to distractions, to meetings that didn't matter, to anything that pulled her away from her mission. And she measured her progress, tweaking her designs based on feedback, never settling for good enough. When her work hit the production line, it wasn't just a car, it was a statement. And people didn't just admire her, they respected her. They leaned in, not because she was loud or flashy, but because she'd built something undeniable. That's what I want for you. I want you to build a life with architecture, with design, with intention. Don't just let life happen to you. Don't let the world dictate your schedule, your priorities, your dreams. Be the architect of your own destiny. Decide what your vision is. Set goals that scare you. Build habits that sustain you. Draw boundaries that protect you. And measure your progress with brutal honesty. Because when you do that, when you live with that kind of structure, you don't just drift through life, you shape it. You become a force, a woman whose life is a rocket built to break through the atmosphere and reach the stars. Here's why this matters. When you live with architecture, people notice. They see the scaffolding rising, the structure taking shape, the vision coming alive brick by brick. They don't just see a woman, they see a woman who's building something bigger than herself. And that's when they start to fear losing you. Not because you're playing hard to get, not because you're distant, but because you've proven you can build a world with or without them. You've shown them that your life has weight, that your time is finite, that your presence is a privilege, and that realization, that quiet awe, is what makes them lean in, not out of obligation, but out of respect for the masterpiece you're creating. I've seen this in my own life when I was pouring everything into SpaceX, when every decision was guided by the mission to reach Mars. People didn't just see a guy with a crazy idea. They saw a system, a vision, goals, habits, boundaries, and constant measurement that made the impossible feel inevitable. And the women who inspired me most, they had that same architecture. They weren't floating through life hoping to be noticed. They were building lives so deliberate, so purposeful, that their presence felt like a gravitational pull. They weren't just beautiful, they were essential. So, ladies, here's the challenge. Stop living like your life is a rough draft. Start treating it like a rocket you're designing to reach the stars. Define your vision. What's the one thing you'd fight for, no matter what? Set goals that push you to the edge. Build habits that turn your dreams into reality, one small choice at a time. Draw boundaries that protect your fire and measure your progress. Not to judge yourself, but to keep yourself on course. Because when you live like that, when you build a life with architecture, you don't just become a woman people want you, become a woman they can't afford to lose. And that's the kind of beauty that changes the world. Ladies, let's strip everything down to the core, to the one thing that makes you not just a woman, but a force, a presence so undeniable that the world feels different when you're in it. It's not about how you look, how you dress, or how many people approve of you. It's about living so true to yourself, so unapologetically aligned with your essence that you become irreplaceable. Not because you're perfect, not because you're unattainable, but because you're real. Your your flaws, passions, quirks, dreams, all of it. And when you live that way, when you stop hiding and start radiating, you don't just draw people in, you make them fear a world without you. That's the kind of woman I've always been drawn to, the kind who doesn't just exist, but burns with a light that can't be replicated. And that's the woman I know you can become. Let me take you to a moment that hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was in the thick of Neuralink, buried in late night debates about brain machine interfaces, ethics, and the future of humanity. It was chaos, endless questions, impossible deadlines, and a vision that felt like it was pulling me apart. At a dinner one night, someone I cared about looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you ever stop chasing?" I didn't think twice. I just said, if I stopped, I wouldn't be me. It wasn't a rehearsed line or some clever quip. It was the truth, raw and unfiltered. And in that moment, I saw something shift in her eyes. She didn't just hear me, she felt me. She saw the real me, not the version I thought she wanted, but the guy who's obsessed with pushing humanity forward, who'd rather die than live a life that's not his own. That's when I realized authenticity isn't just a choice. It's gravity. It's what pulls people in and makes them stay, not out of obligation, but out of awe. Here's the deal. The world is drowning in fakes people pretending to be what they think others want, wearing masks to fit in, to be liked, to be enough. But masks are heavy, they're exhausting. And sooner or later, they crack, usually at the worst possible moment. I've tried it. Early on, I thought I had to be the nice guy, always agreeable, always available, always smiling, even when I was dying inside. I thought that's what would make people stay, but it didn't. People could sense the disconnect, the way I was bending myself into a shape that wasn't mine. And instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. The day I dropped the mask, the day I said, "This is me, take it or leave it," everything changed. Some people laughed, some walked away. But the ones who mattered, they leaned in. They wanted more. Not because I was perfect, but because I was real. That's what I want for you. I want you to stop apologizing for who you are. Stop hiding the parts of you that feel too big, too intense, too out there. Your obsession with painting, your late night coding sessions, your dream of starting a business that changes lives, your weird sense of humor, your unfiltered laugh, those aren't flaws. They're your signature. They're what make you you. Um, and when you embrace them, when you live them without shame, you send a message to the world. I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to stand out. And the people who belong in your life, the ones who see your light, won't just stay, they'll fight to be part of it. Let's talk about why this is so powerful. Authenticity is consistent. When you're real, you don't have to scramble to remember which version of yourself you showed to which person. You don't overthink every word, every move. You just show up as you are, and that consistency builds trust. People might not always agree with you, but they know you're not faking it. They know you're not bending to please them. And that trust, that realness is stronger than any approval you could win by pretending. I've seen it in the women who've inspired me most. They weren't perfect, they were honest. They didn't hide their ambition, their struggles, their fire, and that's what made them magnetic. That's what made me fear losing them, not because they were always there, but because they were always themselves. I remember a woman I worked with at SpaceX. She was a material scientist, one of the best. But what stood out wasn't just her brain, it was her refusal to play small. She'd walk into a room full of engineers, most of them men, and own it not by being loud or aggressive, but by being unapologetically herself. She'd argue her point, call out bad ideas, laugh at her own mistakes, and never once try to be what the room expected. Some people didn't get it. They wanted her to soften, to conform. But she didn't. And you know what? The ones who mattered, the ones who saw her fire, respected her more for it. They didn't just want her on the team, they needed her because there was no one else who could bring what she brought, no one else who could be her. That's the kind of woman you need to be, the kind who doesn't shrink to make others comfortable, the kind who doesn't apologize for her intensity, her dreams, her truth. Because when you live like that, you don't just become beautiful, you become irreplaceable. People don't fear losing a performance, they fear losing the real thing. And the real thing is you, your quirks, your passions, your fire, all of it, unfiltered and unapologetic. But here's the hard part: authenticity isn't easy, it's scary. You've been taught to fear showing your true self. What if people don't like it? What if they leave? What if you're too much? Let me tell you a secret. The ones who leave were never meant to stay. The ones who can't handle your fire, your truth, your light, they're not your people. And the ones who stay, they're the ones who see you for who you are and know they can't find that anywhere else. They're the ones who'll fear losing you, not because you're perfect, but because you're real in a world that's anything but. Let's make this practical. How do you live true? Start by asking yourself, who am I when no one's watching? What do I love? What do I dream about? What makes me feel alive? Maybe it's the way you lose yourself in a book, the way you light up when you talk about your goals, the way you dance when you think no one's looking. Those are the pieces of you that matter. Those are the pieces you need to bring to the world, not hide away. Stop worrying about being too much, too passionate, too driven, too loud, too quiet. Whatever it is, own it. Because the moment you start living as your true self, you stop being a copy and start being an original. And originals, they're the ones people can't replace. I've learned this the hard way. When I was younger, I tried to fit in. I tried to be what people expected, a normal guy, a safe bet, but it never worked. The more I hid my obsession with rockets, with the future, with the stars, the less people respected me. The day I stopped caring, the day I said, this is who I am, deal with it, was the day everything shifted. The people who laughed faded away. The ones who leaned in, they became my allies, my partners, my friends. They didn't just want to be around me, they wanted to be part of what I was building. And that's what authenticity does. It filters out the noise and draws in the signal, the people who see you, who value you, who know that losing you would be like losing a star from the sky. So, ladies, here's the challenge: drop the mask. Stop pretending to be what you think the world wants. Stop softening your edges to make others comfortable. Be the woman who's obsessed with her dreams, who laughs too loud, who cries when she needs to, who fights for what she believes in. Be the woman who walks into a room and owns it, not because she's trying to, but because she's not trying to be anything other than herself. Because when you live that way, when you radiate your truth, you become a force, a woman who doesn't just exist, but transforms the world around her. And here's the beautiful part: when you live true, you stop needing people to validate you. You stop chasing approval. You start choosing who gets to be in your orbit, not because you're cold or untouchable, but because you know your worth. You know that your life, your fire, your truth is a privilege, not a right. And the people who see that, the ones who lean in, they'll fear losing you, not because you're manipulating them, but because they've glimpsed something rare, something real, something they know they'll never find again. So go be you. Be the woman who lives so true, so bold, so unapologetically herself that the world can't help but take notice. Be the woman who doesn't just light up a room, but lights up the universe. Because when you do, when you embrace every part of who you are, you don't just become beautiful, you become irreplaceable. And that's the kind of woman who changes everything.